In this week's episode, we'll be interviewing Jorge Orchilles, a very seasoned, very experienced cybersecurity professional, to get his thoughts on cloud, the future of cybersecurity, and what his thoughts are on the financial services. Coming up. Hey everybody, welcome back to Simply Cyber, a YouTube channel dedicated to helping cybersecurity professionals take their career further, faster. Today, we're going to be talking with Jorge Orchilles. Jorge is a seasoned cybersecurity professional with over a decade easily of experience. He's a SANS instructor for several different SANS courses. He's got a lot of time spent in the financial services industry, which we'll be talking to him about, which really is an interesting industry and really well funded when it comes to cybersecurity, very much well ahead of the curve. Now, really quick, if you're new here, my name is Jorge Orchilles, and this is Simply Cyber. Each week, I publish a new video surrounding cybersecurity topics, interviews, particular niche things, but it's always cybersecurity, and it's always a lot of fun. So if you're interested, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and you'll get notified. Now, I will say, typically the interviews on this channel have been very, very focused. So we've talked to Don Weber about ICS security, or Paul Imey about pen testing. Now, with Jorge, he and I basically both volunteered recently at GrimCon, a virtual cybersecurity conference, which, by the way, was excellent. Thank you very much to the folks at Grim. And he and I were kind of hanging out in the lobby. Interestingly, like, the virtual security cons are very much like real cons, except even more accessible and kind of a bit better for networking. He and I were hanging out and started talking and shared some stories, shared some thoughts, and we really connected. So I asked him if he'd be interested in being here on the show, and he said absolutely. Now, I originally was going to just focus on financial services because it is an interesting industry all into itself, but Jorge just has so much experience and such a wide breadth of information that we basically had a cup of coffee and had a talk. So grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's jump into the interview. Well, thanks, Jorge, for taking time to be here with us today. For the viewers and really for myself, can you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience in the cybersecurity space?
So thanks for having me, first of all. I appreciate it. It was great meeting you at GrimCon, volunteering there and giving back to the community. I started my, hacking, if you will, when I was a kid in video games. I played Grand Theft Auto 2, was the game that time. It was the first game I actually hacked to make the cars go a lot faster than they normally would and make everything, like, I'd just steal a bunch of cars and make them blow up, and I wanted that explosion to be bigger. I think that's probably my first hack ever. And then because I played video games, I wanted the computer to be faster. So I, instead of buying a computer, which was way more expensive, I bought all the parts, convinced my parents, 12, 13-year-old convincing your parents to buy a computer back then. It was, I think, a 600 megahertz computer, or 700, 750. It was an AMD, and I was able to overclock it to a gig, which was, a gigahertz was super fast, and it would overheat as well. So had to kind of figure out all those things as we went along. And then that was probably like my original start. Then I went to a small private high school, and I was the only person interested in computers and taking a computer class, with the only person that there ran the computer lab and all the systems. So he ended up giving me admin rights and domain admin. And I was maybe 15, 16 years old at this, no, actually earlier, yeah, like 14, 15, because I ended up moving for 11th and 12th grade. And I had domain admin when, in a environment where there was a K through 12 school there. So it was kind of fun, messed around. Loftcrack had just come out. So I figured out how to dump everyone's password and then crack their password. I was already a domain admin, but still, kind of getting into that. And then from there, I started just hustling because I wanted to have money to go out and do stuff in high school. So I started just offering hourly services, removing viruses and stuff from people around the town. And that kind of propelled into fixing someone's home computer. And they're like, oh, I have a small business. Can you come do the same there? My computer there is slow. And then I do that and then kind of start doing this consulting job before I was even in college. And then in college, I studied management information systems, and there was a project to migrate from NT to Active Directory. And by this time, I'm like, oh, I have 5 years experience as a domain admin, right? So did that migration, big university, Florida International University, go Panthers. And from there, I went to a hiring fair, and there was a job at Terramark. Terramark is a company that got bought by Verizon, and they have the NAP of the Americas, the Network Access Point of the Americas, also known as Disneyland for us geeks. It's where all the undersea cables come into the Southeast United States. This big building in downtown Miami, and I started working there as a system administrator. And then I was doing, what was it? It was the migration to semantic endpoint security, and it has a firewall, and that firewall had a any rule at the top. So I went to the security folks. I'm like, hey, this doesn't look right? Like this, and any rule, as far as I know, and I know nothing at this point, means that there is no firewall, right? Like all these other rules don't apply. And they're like, yeah, that's right. Nice catch. We were about to deploy this on every corporate system. So that's cool. Are you interested in security? I'm like, yeah, of course. And then I got a job as a security operations center analyst there at Terramark. My first full week by myself after training was the July 4th, 2009 DDoS attacks, where this large botnet was targeting and hit the whitehouse.gov and Department of Transportation.gov, which is one of the things we were securing. See, we at Terramark were the pilot for the US government's move into cloud computing. So Terramark had an infrastructure as a service offering on top of VMware, and our job was kind of to figure out how to monitor that, which was pretty cool stuff back then. I did that for a year just because it was very tough hours, like graveyard shift, and I kind of felt like I was just taking punches the entire time. And then through networking, I was a member of ISSA. I got offered a ethical hacking job at a global financial, and then that's where I kind of got into pen testing officially, like actually getting paid for pen testing. And then I've been there for the past 10 years. So long-winded answer of how I got started, I think a little bit for everyone's enjoyment.
One thing you said that I find, well, two things you said that I find really interesting, and something that I actually promote quite a bit when I talk to people who are looking to get into information security. You had said that you went and talked to the security team about something you had found. I don't know what I'd like your thoughts on this. I always found security teams were always understaffed and undermanned, and we're looking for anyone to help us. And you can put out a rec for a job and stuff, but if someone, typically an IT person, is already demonstrating interest, demonstrating capability, being collaborative with the security team, they're oftentimes sought out to see if they would be interested in getting on board with the security. Have you seen that in your experience?
Yeah, no, I'm actually very thankful for all those folks, and I can name one by one, and I still talk to all these folks because they're really the reason and what got me into security. Like I would see them, working in the SOC and, building out these incident response services. And Terramark at this point, like everyone was new to cloud computing. We actually didn't even call it cloud then. We were calling it co-location 2.0. And Terramark was hiring like the top people. They had Aaron Walters, who's one of the main project leads for volatility, Harlan Carvey, who does registry, forensics. Like they were hiring, Chris Day, all these people. I can name them for days. And they were just all awesome. Like for an IT person, like those were the cool kids. Those are who I wanted to hang out with. They were doing the cool stuff while I'm here, re-imaging machines and figuring out why this person's, computer keeps rebooting or why this account keeps locking out. So I'd always go by, and whenever they needed help because they didn't have admin on their machines, right? Like that's a best practice. And it was back then, I would go and help them and just ask questions while I was fixing their stuff. And I guess I just asked the right questions and showed that interest. But yeah, I definitely agree that that's probably what propelled me into them saying like, hey, look, we have this job. I think it's a good shift for you. You can use, your system admin experience and all you know about the network to now defend it. And we did SOC for the corporate environment, which is where I had the experience with, and SOC also for the customers. And doing cloud computing back in 2008, 2009 was definitely ahead of its time, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The other thing that you had mentioned that I promote for people looking to get really into the field or take their career in a different direction or kind of take control is the professional networking. Now, you mentioned ISSA. What's your experience and thoughts on the importance of professional networking? And I'd like to point out the whole reason I'm talking to you right now is because you and I met at a conference. But what are your thoughts around the importance and utility of networking? And what would you say to people who are, because traditionally IT/security people aren't always the most extroverted.
Right. Yeah. No. Networking, I would say, is very, very important, especially in my story, because I wanted to get into security, so I would go to the ISSA meetings, even though I was a system admin. I would learn more about security and kind of get that mindset. And then there, meeting people, and South Florida, where I've lived pretty much my whole life, had Hack Miami back then, which was a hacker space, more the traditional hacker, breaker, tinker. So I met people there. I met people in ISSA, which was a little more professional. There's also ISC Squared. Any meetup you can go to. We also have an OWASP chapter down here. Any meetup and just meet like-minded people and talk to them. And I guess it's a little scary at first to be like, hey, I'm George. Who are you? Let's talk. But I've always been big on those relationships. And it was the first time I ever spoke was at an ISSA on Windows 7, and particular Windows 7 security, because it was ISSA. It was really around the time I was writing the Windows 7 administrator's reference book as it was being published, right? Still system admin, but there was that security chapter. So really going after that target market, figuring out, what they want to talk about and talk with them about that. And then because of that, there was 2 or 3 people that worked at this financial, and I knew they worked there. I knew they were doing some work there, and I'd ask them about it, like how cool it is that I'm here doing SOC work and you're over there breaking stuff. Obviously everyone has their different what they think is cool. I thought that was cool, and I would ask them about it, and then they heard that the infrastructure ethical hacking team was looking for someone, and they're like, hey, you know infrastructure, you like security, I know you because we've gone to Hack Miami together, and I saw your talk at ISSA and this, why don't you apply for the job? And then that's literally how I ended up getting the job, or even hearing about the job. I wasn't even in the market looking. It just came up because of networking. Yeah.
So I find it interesting. So I wanted to ask you, having spent so much time in the financial sector, it really is kind of the front runner as far, in my opinion, of like implementing and spending money on security. And it makes sense because that's where the money is. But you just said it was 2009, 2010, and they were looking to add to their ethical hacking team. Like, to think that in 2010, and I know that's only 10 years ago, but like ethical hacking is, I would say, pen testing and offensive security and stuff, that's been around-ish. But 10 years ago, that's not really a core internal capability that organizations had. So can you kind of talk to us about what security is like in the financial sector specifically?
Yeah, so if you think about it, why do you bank with the bank that you bank, just as a consumer? Because you trust them. Like, that's really the only thing they're selling to you is trust. Like any of these banks has that, infrastructure to hold your money, but you want to have your money in a place where it won't disappear. So really, trust and reputation is the main thing you're selling. And when you sell trust and reputation, then security matters a lot more. You don't want to wake up and be on the front cover of the Wall Street Journal saying, this was hacked, right? And even like you look back, you see the Capital One hack, right, which was recent, or you see things that Wells Fargo was doing, you see other banks and what they were doing. They lose that reputation, and that means they lose customers, and which leads to losing money. So when you sell reputation and that trust, it's pretty much your bread and butter, and information security is important. You don't want to get hacked. So most financials have that culture and that requirement of information security coming from the top down. And that's always where you want to work. You want to work at an organization where the senior level, from the board of directors to the C levels and all the way down, care about information security. And as I was saying, I teach for SANS, I like speaking with folks as to what their challenges are. And all the time what I hear is, yeah, you can do that because you're in a financial, or you have the budget because you're in a financial. And which just like reiterates it, right? I've been there 10 years, so kind of have this kind of view on various things. But yeah, I mean, since back then, once you connect yourself to the internet, it became important. I think most organizations started with consultants doing ethical hacking, and then started building the internal team. When I started, I was the 7th or 8th person in the ethical hacking team, and today there's over 140 in the internal ethical hacking.
Oh my goodness. So, okay, that's interesting. Can you elaborate a bit on how you've seen, I mean, obviously 10 times headcount is one indicator, but can you kind of talk about like what the evolution of that capability for, I guess, really a financial sector system,
right?
But where was it 10 years ago and where is it now?
Yeah, and I speak a lot to other folks, so this isn't just in where I work, but also other organizations. I feel the maturity level is the same, even for those new. So you start with the vulnerability scanning, where you are running a tool and it's matching signatures and telling you that you're missing certain patches or have some configuration that's not a best practice. Then from there, you go into vulnerability assessment, where you actually have a person verifying those findings from that vulnerability scan. And in these large organizations, you can have over 1 million internal systems, which leads to a whole lot of vulnerabilities when you scan them. So I actually started when we were doing just that, vulnerability scanning and vulnerability assessment. The next step was to introduce penetration testing and actually exploiting some of these vulnerabilities we found to determine real business risk. So building that in a large organization that moves trillions of dollars per day is kind of scary, because imagine if you bring something down, which is the risk of penetration testing, you're actively exploiting a vulnerability on a production system. So, kind of building up that trust, and again, reputation. Our internal team had to build a reputation to say, we will follow these rules, we'll follow the scope, we will exploit when we can, and if we bring anything down, we'll notify everyone as quickly as possible so it comes back up and we don't affect anyone. From there, about 5 years ago, is when we started the red team, which was the newer part, and again, evolving, right, from vulnerability assessment, now pen testing, then the red team. And the red team, we wouldn't just exploit vulnerabilities because that's a pen tester. We were actually starting emulating different threats that we saw out there, different campaigns. So one of the first ones was Drydex. Drydex was a Word document that this group was sending, saying that you had an account payable. You'd open that Word document, then you had to enable macros. If you enabled macros, then they would get code execution and get a foothold into that end user system. So we started by going after 1,000 people. We sent this email, right? And this was still our pen test team kind of transitioning into red team. And we had like 25% of the people fall for this. That's 250 shells that we got back. And we said, wow, this doesn't scale. I mean, it's nice to get 250 shells back and own that many systems, but what value are you really bringing? And then from there, we built a phishing program where we fish all the staff on a quarterly basis, some on a monthly basis if they're high risk or highly targeted. And then only see who clicked on it or who opened the attachment or who enabled macros, and kind of just have like a metric. So we're doing phishing simulation on people and only testing people. So kind of differentiating there from pen testing. And then also doing these full-on campaigns, a full end-to-end adversary emulation. Hey, the US government just took down Soleimani, who is a Iranian high-level official. We believe we're going to have repercussions in the cyber world. What do we know about them? Well, we know that they have APT-33 is Iranian, APT-35 is Iranian, APT whatever is Iranian. This is how they function. This is what they do. These are the tactics, techniques, and procedures that they go after. They might send a phishing email, then it executes through PowerShell or an HTA file. Then they dump credentials, then they do this. So then that's where the red team comes in and starts emulating those and showing those issues. So there you're really testing people, process, and technology. And then the last thing that I did that was probably innovating there was a couple of years ago, we brought in the concept of purple team. So instead of doing all these blind red team engagements where the blue team didn't know about it, only some of the senior folks in the blue team knew about it, why not work together from the get-go? Now, for us, after doing a lot of blind testing, the blue team didn't really like us. So we had to kind of get that relationship going, right? And our seniors, they're awesome. Like they sent us all to Black Hat, or they would send us all to Black Hat, different people from different teams to kind of get together and meet each other, because we're generally not in the same location. And then from there, we had a couple of in-person purple team exercises where the red team would show a particular TTP, and then we'd discuss what could possibly stop it. Well, it's an email coming in. All right, you have your email gateway, you have your email security, you have your endpoint security. If it opens and establishes a C2, you have your proxy and your network firewalls and all this. All right, let's run it. And then you tell me what you see. And we'd run it there in front on the screen. Then the blue team would go. The SOC would look to see if there's any alerts on their SIM. The hunt team would look through EDR. The incident response team will pull the memory because we tell them what systems we're compromising. And that kind of built that nice relationship up of working together to really make security better by using offense. And it works both ways, right? The blue team sees something or learns something, they should inform the red team. So a popular saying is blue informs red and red informs blue. And that's kind of, 10 years of maturity or maturing in an organization in 5 minutes or less.
Yeah, I really feel purple teaming's got a lot of value. I think part of the challenge isn't the technology, but it's really breaking down that adversarial mindset of it's us versus, or red versus blue. It's really red and blue collaborating. And I feel like once you kind of get that shift in your mind, it's, sky's the limit after that.
Yep.
So you had mentioned SANS. Now, you are an instructor, of course, of several courses, basically like 7 or 8 different ones here, a lot of hacking, pen testing related ones, which makes total sense. It maps to your career set. One of the ones that you teach is cloud security fundamentals. And I'm kind of curious, without diving into what you're teaching in that particular class fully, what kind of things do you focus in on that class, and how do you see cloud, because cloud's really where we're all going and where we actually really are right now, but bigger organizations are migrating slower. What are your thoughts around, cloud security, infrastructure in the cloud, and really what is going on in that SANS class particularly that could help folks?
Yep. So actually a fun little story. I started teaching SANS and getting into SANS when I was still at Terramark doing security operations center work. The ISSA chapter brought Stephen Northcutt, who's one of the original SANS founders and GIAC founders, in to do a keynote. And because Terramark was, the Disney World for geeks, he came to see it. And, older gentleman, he was allowed in to actually sit next to me. I just happened to be the lucky guy that was there. He was asking all these questions. I'm like, wow, I really changed my whole thought of, older people now being technical. and being like, wow, this guy knows his stuff. I didn't know this, but he like wrote the intrusion detection course, right? And he's ended up being, you know, way smarter than anything I could have imagined. But really, the reason I'm saying this is that I met him and I was actually showing him how we were doing infrastructure as a service security, because we were one of the only cloud providers back then doing that. So because of that is how I got into SANS to actually teach it. And the virtualization security fundamentals and then the cloud security fundamentals were actually classes I taught before teaching the pen test course, because you can't teach pen testing, you know, the second year that you're doing pen testing. I didn't start teaching pen testing until, you know, 5 years ago, when I had 5 years of experience doing it. So that's actually one of the older ones. And obviously it continues to grow. Moses Frost just released a cloud pen testing course, a 6-day one, which, you know, is doing great. It just went through its second beta, and it's a great course. And it is what we're living today. And really the shift is a mindset shift of, before you had everything in your data center, it was your data center, you would physically go and touch it, to now you're building this out in someone else's computer, right? And there's often the memes of the Matrix 1, right? Or the only Matrix, depends who you talk to, of saying there is no spoon. And the meme says, there is no cloud, it's just someone else's computer, right? And we laugh about that, but at the end of the day, you are hosting your stuff, you're moving workloads to another environment. And with that comes significantly more complexities than you are used to today. And that's really the biggest change. You are now moving to a trusted provider, right? This is a third party. Let's say you're moving to Microsoft's cloud, right? They're doing some awesome stuff there, especially if you're mostly an Active Directory environment. A lot of the things that they have there, there's actually better security in that environment than you can have in your own Active Directory environment today, right? With this new ATP solutions and things like that. But the amount of things you have to think about now and plan out are so much more. You need to think about authenticating your end users that are now coming in from wherever they want. Make sure that they have multi-factor authentication. Before, you didn't have that. Most people log into their machine that's physically in their corporate environment with a username and password. So you're going to move that shift. You also moving your shift of, now these systems are in the cloud. I can spin them up much quicker. Should I even patch, or should I just build a new system, right? And that old school thinking that we've been like patching for the last 20 years is now like, oh, you know what? Don't even patch, just spin up a new environment or a new image that's already coming with the latest build. And really moving towards infrastructure as code, right? Where you have your Terraforms and your Ansibles, just building things out brand new, right? And, you know, kind of going back to the SANS thing, that's exactly what we're doing in our Red Team course. We're building out environments for that class a day before, all through code. And that's going out to whatever cloud environment you want, but there's all these complexities, right? So I think that's really the big mindset shift, especially for those that came from traditional system administration to now doing this in the cloud environment. You know, IAM is probably one of the biggest things, permissions on all the various different components that you have, right? We see Amazon S3 buckets getting exposed all over the place, being one of the main culprits. And it's not technology that wasn't there. It's literally user access that you forgot to look at because it's another thing you have to look at.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So for folks who may be just meeting you for the first time, like what kind of projects are you working on, or what kind of other events are you doing where if people want to, you know, get more George, you know, they could get, you know, involved or get to, you know, more info from you?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm on Twitter. I'm pretty active on Twitter, so follow me there and connect with me on LinkedIn. I don't use LinkedIn as like a closed source anything. Connect with me. I accept everyone there, and that's generally where I post most of the things. Lately, projects I've been working on, one is called the C2 matrix, the command and control matrix. So whenever you compromise a system, you need to have a communication channel to it and be able to control that system. So you do that with command and control frameworks. There's a lot of them out there. Some that you might have heard of, you know, your typical Metasploit or your PowerShell Empire, but there's actually 42 of them in this matrix. It's at the c2matrix.com. You can see all of them and all their various different capabilities. It started as a project of, I'm a red teamer, I want to emulate an adversary. And what do I do? What tool do I use to emulate this particular adversary? But then as I started presenting it and, got great feedback, I think I got over 1,500 followers on Twitter in like the first 2 or 3 months. Blue team started saying, oh, this is awesome because now I know what to test against myself. What detection or how can I detect this? So it's really grown. Now there's a virtual machine that has 8 command and controls already built in that you can get for free. I did that with SANS. It's called SANS Slingshot C2 Matrix Edition. So if you've never used these, download this free VM, run in an environment and test it out. We continue to expand and ask for contributors there. And that's probably been my main project lately, apart from just giving back to the community. I think we all take a lot from the community, and giving back is very important to me. We met at GrimCon. We were both volunteering there. Whenever I have the time, I volunteer, right? Where no matter your experience, no one, you're never going to be the smartest person in the room. So always learn, be open-minded to things. And, that's what I try to do. I try to learn as much as I can. And if something interests me, I'll check it out. And then if I can share it back, even though you can think like, oh, I learned this from someone else, why don't they share? Maybe they don't have the time to share it. Maybe you learned something. Put it out there, record yourself, record your screen and show it, put it on YouTube, get it out there. If one person sees it and gains something out of it, then good job. Like, that is fulfilling for me. So that's where you can find me. I'm talking all the time. I'm doing DERPCon next week. I'm teaching 504 the week after. I don't know when you're going to publish this. But yeah, I teach SANS, Twitter, LinkedIn. Reach out, connect.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, George, for your time and your thoughts. That was really an excellent interview. I personally haven't worked in the financial services space, but it is good to know that, it really is about trust. And, the tone at the top I find is so crucial in any organization's successful cybersecurity programs. And really, that's where financial services, where that tone is being set, is right at the top. So again, thanks for joining us this week. And until next time, stay secure.